Hello, welcome. Oh, people are still popping in. Hello there. My name's Barack Rosenblum. Welcome to Thinking Critically in College, What You Need to Know with Lewis Newman, who's going to introduce himself in just a moment. I am the owner and creator of EssayQuest. I mentor high school students with their college essays. In EssayQuest, schools and nonprofits and teachers and consultants use to streamline their process and for college essays. And what I wanted to do, originally talking with Lewis and talking with some others, was create a webinar series of people who believe that life's an adventure and that college can be an adventure. And I like to say that writing college essays can be a chore or an adventure. And as I started talking with Lewis months ago, we met late last year, it became very clear that we shared some of those same beliefs. So during this webinar, please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. At the end of the webinar, we'll stick around for Q&A, answer any of your questions. I'm going to mute myself and I'll bounce back in every now and then. But otherwise, I will turn this over to Lewis.
Thank you, Barack. Thank you all for being here. I now am going to go share my screen and begin the presentation. So by way of introduction, as you'll see on this first slide, I'm the former Dean of Academic Advising at Stanford. In that capacity, I was at Stanford from 2016 to 2022, those 6 years. And the office that I oversaw included all the professional academic advisors of undergraduates at the university. We also did pre-professional advising for pre-med and pre-law students. We ran the new student orientation week programming, and we also ran the summer bridge program for first-gen college students, among other functions that came through our office. So it was a busy place. I loved those years. Prior to that, I had been a full-time professor and then an administrator at Carleton College. If you're not familiar with Carleton, small, very fine selective liberal arts college in Minnesota, about 35 miles south of Minneapolis. I had a wonderful career there as a faculty member and then as the associate dean of the college, where I also oversaw the academic advising program. So what I want to do today is talk to you about something that I've really developed a strong interest in over these last many years. And it is the subject of a book that I will get to toward the end of the presentation, but it is about thinking critically in college. And one of the things that I discovered sort of late in my career, to be honest, is that many students, even very, very talented and highly motivated students, get to college and discover that it's actually a lot harder than they imagined. They might have aced high school, and all of a sudden, it's as if they're in a different league. They don't exactly know what's being expected of them. They're struggling to keep up, and they don't understand why. And the study skills that served them well in high school are no longer working as well for them. And there are many different manifestations of this. So I wrote this book essentially to ease students in this transition from the academic world of high school to the academic world of college. And I'm going to be sharing some of that at a very high level with you in this presentation. So everyone who goes to college wants to succeed. I think that's a given. Nobody goes to college expecting or wanting to fail. Right? The question is how to succeed. And if you've looked into this at all, there are literally dozens of college success books out on the market. And I've looked at a lot of them, I will tell you, and they say a lot of very similar things. And that advice includes things like go to your professor's office hours, right? Those times set aside for meeting with students. Learning to take good notes. If that's not something you already know how to do, it's important to take good notes so that when you go back to review them, you really can understand what was covered in those lectures. Getting enough sleep, eating well, learning how to manage your time, often a big challenge for college students, particularly beginning college students who have a lot more free time and have a hard time figuring out exactly how to use that time well. Learning how to get along with your roommate. Again, often a new challenge for beginning college students. Balancing academics and extracurricular commitments, including work and other things in your social life. and learning how to manage your finances. These are all great pieces of advice, right? None of them I would disagree with. And it is clear to me as a faculty member all my life, this will not do. This is not sufficient, right? Necessary, but not sufficient. And what's missing is that none of this exactly tells you how the work that you're going to do in those classes in college is actually more demanding than the work that you may have had to do in high school, and how to do it, right? So that's what I wrote the book to address, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this webinar. I should add, if you do want to interrupt me at any point with a question, please put it in the chat. I can't be monitoring the chat and also running the slides, but Barak, I'm sure will be, and will be interrupting me as we go.
I'm on it.
You're on it. Terrific. Thank you, Barak. So for starters, I think it's important that we really ask the most fundamental question, which is, why are we in college in the first place? Right? Now, that may sound silly, because for most of us, it's just a given that we're going to go to college. For many of us, anyway, it is. And if we've given it much thought at all, the most obvious answer to this question is that it's going to prepare us for some kind of career. Right? Just about everybody knows that going to college opens all sorts of opportunities for various kinds of careers that are not available to you if you don't have a college diploma. Right? And not only does it open up opportunities for careers, but it's actually quite lucrative. Studies that I've seen suggest that college graduates earn about $1 million more on average than non-college graduates over the course of their lives. Now, that's a pretty significant return on investment. No matter how much you paid for college, it's gonna pay you back, right? And that's just an average. Right? So preparing for a career is certainly important, right? But there are a lot of other things that happen in college, and they don't get as much attention, and yet I think they're at least as important. So there's social capital. There's all the ways in which you network and learn things and connect with other people and gain a certain kind of familiarity with touch points of culture and literature and art and music and ideas and a whole range of things that give you a certain sort of ability to connect with other people who have exactly the same experience and know those same touch points. And in fact, you have the ability to converse about things and refer to things that you wouldn't otherwise. There's networking, just simply getting to know people. As the cliche goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in fact, many of you who've been to college will be able to attest, often one of the most significant things that happened while we were in college is we met somebody. Maybe that was a faculty member, maybe it was someone who was a work supervisor, maybe it was simply another student. But they opened a door for us or connected us with someone who connected us with someone else, and sort of over time, that series of connections led to some door opening that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. We might not even have known that door was there. Right? So networking is a big advantage. There are life skills, time management skills, stress management, self-presentation skills that are valuable that you can learn in other places, to be sure. People learn some of these things in the military and in other places, but I think often people learn them in college. There's developing a sense of purpose. There's a colleague here at Stanford, William Damon, in the School of Education, who has devoted his life really to exploring the question of how people develop a sense of purpose. And among his many pieces of research, he's demonstrated the ways in which college serves a very critical role in helping students develop a sense of who they are and where they're headed and what they want to do with their lives. And most importantly, and especially for this presentation, I would say what you learn in college is to become an expert learner and a rigorous thinker. And I emphasize that one in particular for 3 reasons. First, it's what employers actually say they want. Many surveys have been done of Fortune 500 CEOs and other employers. And when they're asked what they're looking for in recent college grads, overwhelmingly among the top things are people who are good problem solvers, people who are creative thinkers, people who can get along with others, work together in teams, people who can express themselves well. But that first one, that learning how to solve a problem and think through a problem well, is exactly what they claim they can't teach you on the job, and they expect you to already know. So That's one piece. It's what our society needs. I don't need to make a political statement to make the obvious observation that we are awash in disinformation and AI-generated images that are not true, and conspiracy theories, and a whole range of things. Our society depends on people being able to distinguish the difference between truthful information, factual information, and garbage or information that is misleading. But that's the second. And finally, it is the most enduring and transferable benefit. If you ask college grads 10 or more years out of school, what they remember in all those courses they took, the likelihood is they will have forgotten a lot of it. Right? I've forgotten a lot of what I learned in college, to be sure. Right? And even if I haven't entirely forgotten it, what I remember may well be outdated. The thing that won't be outdated, right, and that you're not likely to forget, is how to think, how to ask good questions, how to analyze something. If you've learned that skill and you've used it, you will not lose it. It becomes a sort of part of your mental equipment. It's hardwired in. And from that point on, you have the ability to use that skill forever. And it never loses its value. So that's the other reason that I emphasize this element of becoming an expert learner and a rigorous thinker. What I mean by that is, and I'm going to talk now about two separate components, what we call metacognition, which is simply thinking about how we think, being self-aware and self-reflective about our own thinking and learning process. And secondly, critical thinking, sort of properly speaking, which is to say, asking questions about all the information we encounter, whether that's information we encounter in a conversation, through a book, through a lecture, on social media, wherever it may be, we're encountering information all the time. What do we do with it? Right? I say to students whenever I talk to them, if all that mattered in life was how much information you knew, this current generation of students would be the smartest human beings who ever lived. Because by definition, we now have more information at our fingertips on our cell phones than any previous generation of human beings. That does not make us smarter. It just means we have a lot more information at our fingertips. What we do with it, right, is really what matters. Knowing how to do something with it is really what critical thinking is about. So I'm going to now talk about each of those two. I love this quote from Einstein because it demonstrates, I think it puts it right up front, that education is not really about collecting information. It's about training our minds to think in very rigorous ways. Needless to say, Einstein had mastered that, right? But for even those of us who aren't geniuses, right? Education is about training our minds. That's why we're going to college ultimately. Right? In college, information is going to matter. There's no question. There are certain bodies of information you need to know. If you're studying chemistry, you need to know the periodic table of the elements, right? If you're studying Spanish, you need to know a lot of vocabulary and grammar. And I could go on with any other subject, right? Information is important, but modes of thinking about that information are going to matter a whole lot more. Or as John Chafee puts it, information doesn't become knowledge until we think critically about it, which means, as I'll explain more later, asking questions about it. And we'll talk about what kind of questions in a minute. I like to put up this slide because I think it highlights a set of differences between high school and college. But before I sort of spell them out, I want to add this sort of preface, which is high schools come in all different sizes and shapes and qualities, right? Not all high schools are created equal. Some high schools are incredibly rigorous and prepare students extremely well for college level academic work. Others less so. It also depends not only on the high school, but on how many perhaps AP classes or IB, International Baccalaureate courses you may have taken. There are a lot of variables here, right? That said, on average, right, in high school, I think it's fair to say that the focus is on absorbing and retrieving information. If you know how to do that well, you can probably get an A on the test. In college, it's going to be much more on developing questions and testing theories about that information. In high school, it's about demonstrating what you know rather than exploring what you don't know. The teacher's direct learning in high school, by and large. In college, your learning is going to be, to a much greater degree, self-directed. The focus here on high school is on subjects and topics. In college, it's on disciplines and modes of thinking, to go back to that to that point on the earlier slide. The goal for many students in high school is simply completing the assignments, getting the work in on time. In college, of course, you need to do that too, but it's about intellectual growth. It's about learning how to learn even more effectively and more powerfully than we already do. High school emphasizes the results of learning. College, it's the process of learning. And in high school, by and large, knowledge is presented to you. You are given the knowledge that you need in a textbook or in class. In college, increasingly, while you will get knowledge presented to you in textbooks and other things, still you're going to be working on constructing knowledge and discovering it, not just absorbing it. These are, I think, pretty clear differences between the way most high school courses work and most college courses work. And most students start college not realizing that difference. And that's one of the key reasons why that transition can often be very challenging. It's all of a sudden like you're playing a different game and you don't know the rules of the game. You knew how to do high school, but all of a sudden in college, it's really not clear anymore what it is that you're being asked to do. You've not been asked to do it before, and you don't entirely know how to do it. And probably nobody has explained it. Right? Again, that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I'm giving this webinar. So let's talk about metacognition. Metacognition is two elements here I want to focus on. Learning from mistakes and struggles, because it's in the process of learning from our mistakes that we actually become more aware of how to learn better. And secondly, it's about learning to set goals and track our progress. So let me talk about each of those in turn. So I'm guessing this visual image, which I love, captures an experience that virtually all of us have had. I know I certainly have, right? You feel stuck. You're working on a paper, you're working, preparing for an exam, doing math problems, whatever it might be, and you're just stuck. You cannot crack it. You cannot make progress. You are just stuck mentally. You can't figure out what to do. You're not getting it. It's not making sense. And you're banging your head against a wall or throwing a book against the wall or just, banging your head against your laptop, right? That experience is extremely common, right? And in that situation, right, many people don't know what to do. And then occasionally they have that moment of like, oh, the light goes on, like something clicks, and all of a sudden, something that they didn't see, the solution that they couldn't see before, all of a sudden becomes clear. And there they are. Now they've figured it out. And in those cases, what most of us do, just I think instinctively, is you go, oh, I am so glad I'm not stuck there anymore. Let me finish this, put it away, and move on and do something else, right? Maybe it's go to bed, right, at that point, right? The point is, at that moment, we have a golden opportunity that we are passing up, because that's precisely the moment when we should be taking a step back, engaging in what we call metacognition, asking ourselves, okay, wait a minute, what did I just see that gave me the solution to that problem that I couldn't see 10 minutes ago or several hours ago that I've been stuck on all this time? What enabled me to see it? What did I notice that I wasn't seeing before? And how could I see it better and quicker next time? And here are some ideas of how to do that. Number one, sometimes it's going back to basics. That is to say, sometimes the solution to the problem in front of us is embedded in something we learned a month or a year ago that was way back in our memory someplace that we didn't even realize was relevant to this problem. And yet when we noticed the solution, it was because we went back to something we had learned a long time ago. We zero in on the obstacle. That is, we ask ourselves, what exactly is it here that I'm not understanding? We just focus like laser, in a laser focused kind of way on what's holding us up. Sometimes it's about checking our assumptions, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Sometimes it's looking for unstated connections. The solution to the problem only emerges when we see the connection between one thing over here and something else over there that we don't realize are connected. And it's when we notice that there's a connection between them that we see a solution to a question or a problem that had eluded us. Sometimes it's looking for an analogy. It's just, how is this problem like something else that I have seen before, even though it's not exactly like it. It has elements of something I've seen before. And when I notice that, the solution all of a sudden comes into view. Right? And sometimes it's just giving our brains a break. Right? That is to say, we step away for a while, we go do something completely unrelated, take a run, have a meal, do something else, and come back, and our brains are fresh, and all of a sudden something pops off the page at us that we just completely missed before.
Lewis, can I jump in for a second here?
Go ahead, Brock.
So I love that. I actually do. I'm not going to stop your screen sharing. I'll just talk here. That sense of giving the brain a break. And I talk about this when I work with students trying to figure out what should I write about, or how do I edit this part of my essay. The back of the brain, the big part of the brain that's really doing all the processing, works slowly and in the background.
Right.
And the little voice in our head, most of us have a little voice saying, why can't I figure this out? How should I do this? What's the solution to whatever it is?
Right.
Actually, it's kind of dumb. That's the prefrontal cortex. It's just not made for dealing with complexity. But by engaging with, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? When you realize I am at a stopping point, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Like you said, go do something else. And you've told the back of your mind, the back of your brain, this matters. And it's going 24/7 dealing with patterns, and it starts revealing it.
Right.
And it comes to the consciousness.
Right.
And then you try to tell someone and sound like an idiot.
Right. Right.
And it's just, you keep talking and get it through the language. So that dynamic is something that can come up again and again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is, by the way, exactly why many people find, and there are many stories of this, famous discoveries that, people went to sleep, completely perplexed and baffled by a problem that they've been working on. And then, somehow in their dream, literally at night, some part of their brain is working, and all of a sudden they wake up in the morning and the solution becomes perfectly clear to them. Right. It's some unconscious part of our mind that's actually continuing to work on it, even when we're not awake. Right. So absolutely right. Here's an example of checking your assumptions. I love this little puzzle. Some of you may have seen this before. Here's the assignment. You have to connect all 9 of the dots there using just 4 straight lines, only 4 straight lines. Right. And if you look at that problem for a while, and even just use a pen and hold it up in front of the screen and try to connect all 9 dots with just 4 straight lines, you will probably find yourself stuck very quickly. Right? It feels, in fact, after you look at it for a while, like, well, that's just not possible. You can't connect all. You can connect 8 dots with 4 lines. You can't connect all 9 dots with just 4 straight lines unless you do this. 4 straight lines, all 9 dots got connected. Now, why didn't we immediately think of that? The answer, undoubtedly, is we somehow assumed that the 4 lines had to stay within the area defined by that 9-dot pattern. But I never said that. You assumed it, and most everybody assumes it. And when you try to make it work that way, it is literally impossible to connect all 9 dots with just 4 lines. But if you go outside of that area, it's really quite easy. And that's an example of checking our assumptions. Sometimes we're stuck on a problem because we've made an assumption that we shouldn't have made and didn't need to make, that actually makes the problem either harder or completely impossible to solve. And by challenging that assumption, by noticing what assumptions we're making, we can sometimes see our way clear to the answer. All right. Second piece of this metacognition that I want to talk about is what I like to call the imaginary course that you should be taking every term. So obviously, every term in college, you're taking a lot of courses. They show up on your transcript. You're getting grades in them. All that is good, right? And every term, whether it's a quarter, semester, however your college works, you should imagine that you're taking yet one more course that will never appear on your transcript, called Becoming a Better Learner. And in this course, you get to set your own goals. You create your own syllabus. You decide, what kind of learner am I trying to become? What is my goal for this semester? In terms of not the specifics of any course, but in terms of reading more critically, maybe writing more fluidly, maybe giving better oral presentations. Maybe it's something that you can be working on that isn't exactly on the syllabus of any of those other courses, but it's what you've decided to work on this term. Be specific about what steps you plan to take to get there. Right? This is your own curriculum. You're creating it for yourself. Decide how you're going to proceed. Track your own progress, maybe once a week. Take 5 minutes, maybe 10 at most. Keep some kind of log or journal. Note what you've been working on and how you've improved. And finally, apply what you've learned everywhere you can. Right? If every student did just that much in terms of sort of this imaginary course, they would be constantly thinking about how they're learning and how they could be learning better. And they'd be setting themselves goals and tracking them. And they would be consciously not just learning the content of their courses, but focusing on how they're learning to learn even better than they already do. All right. So I want to move on to that second element, which I said is critical thinking 101. So there's a whole literature out there about critical thinking. I'm not going to try to go into all of that. There are lots of debates about it. And in many ways, I think a lot of the people who talk about this, philosophers and social psychologists and cognitive scientists and so on, all have different ideas of what critical thinking is. You can find tons of different definitions. But for this presentation and for my purpose, I'm interested in critical thinking in the context of college courses. And as I began to work on this book, what I did was actually look at assignments at Carleton College that had been given by faculty all across the different departments of the college. And I had those assignments tagged, right? Analyzed for what kinds of critical thinking skills were required to complete those assignments successfully. What did a student need to be able to know how to do in order to tackle that assignment? And it turns out that there are actually only 4 of them. And I will tell you that I have now shared this, what's on this, about to be put up on the slide, with a lot of faculty in a number of contexts, and invited them to correct me if I missed something. And I have yet to find a faculty member who has said, no. In my class, students have to do something entirely different. It's not one of your 4. So here they are. Exploring context, essentially asking, where does this come from? Considering alternatives, what Robert Frost would have called the road not taken. Weighing evidence. And finding implications and new applications of things that you know. So I'm going to go over those again really quickly, and you'll see what I mean. Every assignment that we looked at in every discipline and every department asked students to do one or more of these 4 things: explore context, consider alternatives, weigh evidence, or find implications and new applications of something they'd already learned. Okay? Here's what I mean by those things. And these are just examples. These are not exhaustive by any means. Notice that every one of these is a question, because critical thinking is always about asking questions. In this case, it's about asking questions about different kinds of context, historical context, assumptions, audience, and so on. It might be about comparing alternatives, other sources of information, other ways of interpreting the information that's in front of me, right? Alternative ways of solving a problem, right? All of these are comparing alternatives. Why is this way of doing something different? Maybe better, maybe worse, maybe sometimes better and sometimes worse than some other way, right, of doing it. All of that is about comparing alternatives. Weighing evidence. Perhaps if one of these 4 is most important, I'd make weighing evidence like kind of the primary one, right? That is to say, everything you look at, right, you're going to be asking yourself in college, is it true? How do I know it's true? What kind of evidence is there to support the fact that it's true? Is the information that I'm looking at coming from a credible source, right? Is it possible that the evidence, that the argument or the evidence that's being presented to me is actually cherry-picked and it's overlooking other evidence that actually would undermine, right, the conclusions, right? All of these are examples of questions that involve weighing evidence. As I say to students when I give versions of this presentation to to college students, right? There's a cliche, right, that everyone is entitled to their own opinion. And of course, we're all entitled to our own opinions, right? But not all opinions are equally weighty. Not all opinions have evidence behind them. Some opinions actually have no evidence behind them. We call them biases, right? So in that sense, that's what college is about. It's about not just having opinions, it's about having evidence to support your opinions. And finally, finding implications and new applications of things that you already know. And here again, there's a different set of questions about who does the information matter to, where does that information lead? Okay, if that's true, so what? Like, what else do I need to know? Where does that lead me? Right? What would the next question be if I were exploring this further? So on and so forth, right? So once again, it's context, comparison, evidence, and implications. When you have that framework in mind, you approach assignments differently, because every assignment is asking you to demonstrate one or more of those 4 basic critical thinking skills. And even if the assignment isn't exactly explicit about which ones, and I encourage faculty to be explicit about them when they give assignments, but even if it isn't written on the assignment, you can be asking yourself, okay, what do I need to be thinking about here in order to solve this problem or to complete this assignment? Okay. Those skills, by the way, are applicable again across all subjects and disciplines. They're going to look different, right? If you're doing chemistry, then they look if you're doing history. Different kinds of context, different kinds of evidence, different sorts of comparisons you'll be making, and so on. Still, the same 4 basic overarching sets of questions, right, are going to be applicable. Right? And what that means is that what you've learned in one assignment in chemistry or physics or something else might actually help you in a history class or a psychology class or something else if you're thinking about it in terms of context, comparison, evidence, and implications, right? Because it'll help you realize that you're honing a common set of intellectual skills no matter what you're working on. Okay? And finally, it helps you think about assignments in a more, I would say, global way, because most students approach their college education as if it were just a series of assignments to complete or boxes to check off. And you finish all the assignments for each course, and you finish all the courses you're required to take, and you get a diploma, and you are done, right? And if instead you look at assignments and courses as opportunities to master those 4 basic critical thinking skills, you will get a lot more out of your education, and you will, in fact, carry those things with you when you leave college. I like to say to people that this is what your education is really trying to teach you, right? It's not really just about the content; it's about the ways of thinking, which is to say, about thinking critically about everything that you come across in college. Okay. One more thing I want to say about disciplines, because that's a word that means something very specific in the college and university context. Right? In high school, everybody's been exposed to a number of different subjects. Everybody's taken math and history and a variety of science courses and so on, right? But when you get to college, each of those departments that you will be taking courses in, right, is, from our standpoint as academics, is a discipline. That is to say, it's a field of study that people have been working on, in some cases, for centuries, right? And it has a history to it. And there are certain sort of rules about how one does that. Like if you're a historian, right, there are ways of doing history, right, of writing history, right? And here's what you want to know, because one of the things that's going to happen to you in college is you're going to walk into classes in subject areas, that is to say, disciplines you've never encountered before. They're not part of any high school curriculum. Maybe linguistics or, anthropology or something else, right? You have no idea what this subject is really. I mean, you may have a clue what the subject matter is, but you won't have any idea how to do work in that field. And so here are the questions I encourage students to ask. What questions do people in this field, in this discipline, ask? What kinds of evidence do they consider? What methods do they use to create new knowledge? And finally, what issues are undecided, unresolved? What do the people in this field argue about? What do professors in chemistry argue about when they go off to conferences and talk to one another? Right? If every time you walk into a course that's new to you, you begin not with a blank page, just waiting for the professor to start talking to you, but if you walk in instead and sit down and go, okay, what questions are people around here asking? What kinds of evidence do they consider? What kinds of methods do they use? And what issues are they arguing about? That will immediately orient you to that field of study in a completely different way. You will feel connected, and you won't be just kind of roaming around, kind of looking for what is going on here. What are they talking about? Why does this matter to them? Who are they arguing with? Right? What kind of evidence are they talking about? Right? You'll have already kind of gotten inside of their conversation. It's like learning a new language, right? You have to get inside of the way those people talk and think. And this is the way you do it. So final words of advice. This is not specifically related to critical thinking, but I just share it with you because it is related in some ways to that general advice that I referred to on that first slide that many people give students, but with a little bit more attention to academic work. So developing a growth mindset, this is a term that Carol Dweck at Stanford developed, and many people now understand this. It's become kind of part of our popular lingo. That is to say, everybody faces setbacks. The difference is how people approach it when they face a setback. Some people face a setback and go, oh, can't do this. I'm no good at this, right? I'm a disaster. I'm never going to learn this. Right? And other people approach it and go, yeah, that was hard. I didn't do that very well. How can I do that better next time? Right? And if you have a growth mindset in that way, you are much more likely to do well, to develop resilience, what we sometimes call grit, and to bounce back. You want to watch and imitate how your professors think. Not just pay attention to the words they tell you and the information they convey, but how they think. What questions are they asking? How do they connect the various pieces of what they're doing, right? And teaching you. You want to cultivate curiosity. In this one, I often refer to my own grandchildren. I have the great privilege now of having 4 of them. They are insatiably curious. They are curious about everything. They never stop asking questions. It is astonishing, right? Just how fast their minds are absorbing new information. Right? One of the challenges in college is that you're often going to have to take classes in things that you're just not that excited about. How do you get over that? I think the way to do that is to tap into that childlike curiosity. Ask yourself, like, what would be interesting about this? Why would anybody be interested in this? Right? And if you can tap into that sort of innate natural curiosity that you had when you were 2 or 3 or 4 or 6, right, you will begin to sort of get into the subject, even if on the surface it's not something that you're especially fascinated by. Taking risks. By this I mean, in college you could sort of play it safe. You're really good in math. You could just focus on math and probably do pretty well, right? And that would be fine, right? But you'd be missing a great opportunity. And one of the great opportunities in college is that you get to learn about a lot of things you've never learned about before. And when you take those intellectual risks, you go out on a limb and say, you know what? I don't know a thing about linguistics or anthropology. You know what? I'd be kind of curious to know maybe something more about that. Maybe I'll only take 1 course in it, but 1 might be enough to whet my appetite and give me a sense of, now I can read things with the lens of an anthropologist or with the lens of a linguist. And that enables me to ask new sets of questions about things I come across. The world is a fascinating place if we know how to ask questions. And the more disciplines we've been exposed to, the larger the set of questions we've had experience asking. And taking intellectual risks and going out on a limb and trying things that are not familiar to us is a wonderful, wonderful way to grow intellectually in college. Joining a team. I like to say learning is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. That is to say, get together with others who are in your class, study together, test one another, right? When you join a team and you feel like you're in this together with somebody else and not just going it alone, it's more interesting. You probably learn faster and better because you have to explain things to one another and defend your explanations to one another, right? This is the way learning often works. And finally, and probably most importantly, ask for help. Right? Many students have a hard time doing this for whatever reasons, right? And because they're embarrassed, or because they're overwhelmed, or because they've never had to ask for help before, or they've grown up in a culture in which asking for help was somehow a sign of weakness, or whatever it might be. Right? The point is, in college, it's important to practice asking for help. Right? And the sooner students ask for help when they're struggling, the more likely it is that the faculty and others will be able to actually help them get back on their feet and recover from whatever setback they're experiencing. I end my presentations typically with this slide because I think it captures something very important. It's related to critical thinking, but it's even broader than that. I've noticed that many students approach their college education in a very focused and, I would say, sort of instrumental way. That is to say, they have an idea of where they want to go, right? I think, which is often a particular career that they want to have, maybe even a particular company that they want to work for. In Silicon Valley, if you're here in the Bay Area where I am. But even if you're not, you may have a very specific idea of what kind of career you want. And you imagine that your college education is simply your path to that career. And I used to say to students all the time, there's nothing wrong with a career, and there's certainly nothing wrong with having a job, and a good paying job when you get out of college. We all want that. But that's a very limited way of using your education. It's a little bit like saying, right, I want to go to Cleveland, so I'm going to buy myself a plane ticket to Cleveland. And when I get to Cleveland, what do I do with the plane ticket? Well, of course, I throw it out because it's used up. I can't use it again. It served its purpose. But think about that. A plane ticket is a single-use item that takes you to exactly one destination and no others. But now, by contrast, a passport will take you to any destination. It'll take you to as many destinations as you want, including places you may never even have realized existed or had never thought about going there. The passport is still a useful document to get you there. And it's usable again and again and again. It is not a single-use item. It is renewable. In fact, after it expires in 10 years, if it's an American passport, right, you can renew it. And if you do renew it, it's pretty likely that you're going to keep the old one in a drawer someplace. Many people do, because they imagine that they're going to go back someday and look at all the stamps of all the places they visited along the way. Right? It's a document that records all of the stops on our journeys. Right? If we think of our education in college as a passport instead of a plane ticket, right, it completely changes the way we think about what we're doing, how we approach our learning, what we're going to get out of it, how it's useful to us. And I would argue, as I've argued throughout this webinar, that in fact, the key to a passport-like education is focusing on learning and on becoming a good critical thinker. And the more that you focus on that and hone those skills, the more you're getting out of your education and the better the return on your investment will be, because it's no longer just a single-use item. It's now something you've used that is going to last you forever. I say to students all the time, those 4 basic critical thinking skills, pretty simple. Yeah, they all fit on one slide, right? It's not complicated. It's very hard though, right? You practice those skills again and again in assignment after assignment. And it's different when you're practicing them in chemistry than it is when you're doing it in history. And you have to learn all the ins and outs of how to think critically in all sorts of different contexts. Right? That's why you spend 4 years doing it. Right? And when you get your diploma, you're going to continue to do it after you've left college. Right? So the point is simply this. Right? If you think of your education as a passport instead of a plane ticket, you will get a great deal more out of it. You'll get a much better return on your investment. So that's my book and QR code to take you to the website for the book if you're interested. I do a boot camp, what I call a college prep boot camp, which is a 4-session series that's schedulable at the student's convenience, that is basically going through the book and really practicing and learning these critical thinking skills, which include a number of things I haven't covered in today's talk, but really other skills of reading and critical reading and writing and research skills and so forth that are covered and that will prepare you well to do the work in college. And I do work individually with college students who either need a bit of extra attention because they're struggling in some way, or simply want someone to sort of be a coach and advisor as they go through college. I will say, having run academic advising programs, advising is incredibly important to college success. It is one of the most underestimated elements of success in college, and it is very difficult to deliver at scale. I can tell you this from experience. It is very hard in big universities and even in small colleges like Carleton to get really high quality academic advising consistently across all 4 years for all the students in the institution. So I offer my services to work individually and intensively with college students at all stages of their college careers to help provide them with that level of support and guidance. And I'll just mention in the last bullet point on this slide, I do also offer what I call a college launchpad, which is a kind of pre-college, get ready, let's do an evaluation of how ready you are for college, not only academically, but also in other ways, and put together a real transition plan with action items that will help you make that transition smoothly and make sure that you get off on the right foot and that you're connected with the right resources. And I'm always interested in helping students succeed by getting off to a strong start. So that's it. If there are questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm going to quit sharing my screen and come back here to stop sharing. Come back here to just talk with Barak and any of you who have any thoughts or questions about any of that. That's a lot of material in a very short time.
Thanks. And actually, what I'm going to do, this is I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll stick around for Q&A for that. But thank you, Louis. Thank you for those of you who are able to attend live. Stick around. We'll do the Q&A session after that. And there we go.